And good evening. Yep, I'm here. Basically, today's show is going to be about the early superheroes games. And apparently about a visit from Carlton. Gee, what a shock. Now, superheroes are a classic geek genre. And unlike the genres we talked about last time, or 2 times ago rather, there are not there's a nice long stretch of successful superhero role-playing games. I mean, the first role-playing game superhero genre that I know of was Villains and Vigilantes. Villains and Vigilantes came out in 1979, and it had ads for it in Dragon Magazine of all places. It took an interesting approach that was a first for games at the time. You were making yourself as a superhero. Interesting. So, now not everybody did that. A lot of people just went ahead and rolled up random stats instead of trying to figure out what their actual strength was. It kind of complex. You had to know your body weight and your strength score to figure out how much you could lift, and it was your lifting capacity that determined your physical damage, and also had a problem that everyone who had a given power had the exact same aspect of that power. And if you were the same level, you had the same power level with that power. So yeah, it's not that great. But it had some outstanding art for the time, and it stuck around for quite a while. Now, 1981, another now legendary game system came out called Champions. Later, Champions became the term for the superhero setting for the generic hero system. It also added something interesting: the idea of an exponential strength scale. By that I mean, every time you added 5 to your strength, not only did you add 1d6 to your damage, you also doubled the amount of weight you could lift. And it was assumed that anything dealing with damage had a similar force multiplier. So if your starship cannon did 12d6, but your spinal mount cannon did 14d6, the overall actual force of that spinal mount cannon was 4 times that of your standard cannon. But it ended up doing so well, it actually had an MMO that is still around today. It's still available to play, and it's kind of fun as long as you actually, haven't played through all of the storyline quests 15 times like I have. Now, 1982, we had a game come out called Golden Heroes. Now this, again, when we talk about a lot of older game systems, especially ones outside the generic fantasy, we'll start seeing some new game mechanics come in. And this one had one. It was actually picked up and published by Games Workshop, the people behind Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Long may you rest. And Age of Sigmar. Anyway, it had a unique mechanic in that it had what was called personal status. And if your personal status was high enough, you could shift a die roll. It was the first karma-type mechanic used in any kind of role-playing game. For those who aren't familiar, it makes it rather like either the cards from Torg that I mentioned last time, or inspiration from 5th edition, current edition, Dungeons & Dragons. Now, 1983 and 1984 saw 2 companies that already had games out there throw their hat into the ring. And that was, 83 was Superworld by Chaosium, who had made Call of Cthulhu and the Elric game that a lot of people have forgotten about. And then 1984 was TSR's self-proclaimed archenemy, Palladium, who had Heroes Unlimited. Some people also will claim that the Ninja Turtles game they later came up with was a superhero game, but it's more of a unique. It's a genre weirdo. Anyway, I do not know much about Superworld. It was eminently forgettable. Unlike Call of Cthulhu, Superworld just fizzled into the ether. Heroes Unlimited, on the other hand, I saw a couple games of that being played, but as a Heroes Unlimited Second Edition and beyond, more people tend to use it as supplement for Rifts. Yeah. Now, 1984. 5 years into superhero role-playing games, TSR finally makes its move. And it's a big one. They didn't just make a superhero game. They got a licensed superhero game. 1984, TSR released the Marvel Heroes role-playing game. Complete with stats for all your typical characters like Captain America and Spider-Man, Wolverine, Colossus, all of them. And all the bad guys ranging from Stiltman to Doctor Doom. Now, it really decided to push things. For example, if you had incredible strength, 40 points of strength, whenever you punched, you did 40 damage. Your damage was never variable. But the side effects of you hit, you could just hit, you could knock them back, or you could stun them, depending on how well you rolled, because it did not use a standard system. No roll to hit against their agility or armor. No, it had a chart. You roll down this way and your rank across the top. Now, those ranks were interesting. They started with the idea that instead of the number being important, the category was important. So, for example, every human being, every single stat was typical, which is given a number of 6. So if someone with typical strength punches someone else, they do 6 damage. Okay. Now, if you were lower than average, like let's say a young Shadowcat's strength back when she was called Sprite, that'd be a poor, or 4. And finally, if you were really low, such as certain versions of the Incredible Hulk's intelligence, that was feeble. Feeble was 2. On the other hand, if you turn around, if you're above average, that rank was good. A perfect example of good would be Daredevil's strength. Yes, he's only above average. But then again, Captain America only had the very next rank, which was excellent, 20. Now, a character with a typical strength could probably lift somewhere between 100 and 200 pounds. The average businessman only has a poor strength. The average farmer has a typical or good. The usual, if you're doing manual labor, you're going to have higher strength. Anyway, good could lift anywhere from 200 to 400 pounds. That's a pretty wide range, because excellent covered about 500 to just over 1,000 pounds, with Captain America, the comics version, being at 800 pounds. Well within that excellent rank. Excellent was 20 points, by the way. And then, starting with Remarkable, we got into superhuman strength. At Remarkable, lifted anywhere from about 1,200 pounds to about 6 tons, based on the characters that we used as an example. Now, I should clarify here. During this time, Marvel had an editorial fiat that their strongest characters lifted, quote, over 100 tons. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Except that, you know, the same month that they did that editorial fiat, they had Thor toss a locomotive. And the locomotive, just the engine alone, weighs nearly 1,000 tons. So someone who can lift 95 tons is almost as strong as Thor. They're 95, 1,000. No, it was an editorial fiat. Just as long as they got the proportionate strength equivalent, they were happy, even though it wasn't really that accurate to the comics. Anyway, so Remarkable was between 1,200 pounds and 6 tons. This was also based on Captain America, absolute peak human endurance. Next up came Incredible. Incredible was Spider-Man's strength level, and this was anywhere from 7 to actually 25 tons. And Spider-Man with the 10-ton strength was like down here. Most of the average Asgardian warriors had incredible strength. It's also, again, according to Captain America and other characters, peak human agility and peak human intuition, which is their term for perception. Next up, we have Amazing. And Amazing is where old Rogue, the 80s era Rogue, her strength was. It's also basically about 30 tons to 60 tons or so. It's also the peak human, according to many characters, for fighting skill, reason, and psyche, which is willpower. So, your peak human stats: fighting, amazing; agility, incredible; strength, excellent; endurance, remarkable; reason, amazing; intuition, incredible; psyche, amazing. There were characters who were human who had superhuman stats, but they were outliers. For example, Doctor Strange had an unearthly psyche. We'll get to that. Monstrous is what comes after amazing. And where good, excellent, remarkable, incredible, amazing have all been increasing by 10-point increments, with amazing being 50, monstrous was 75. Monstrous strength could lift between 65 and 85 tons. Perfect example would be the Hulk when he's not that angry, like in Ragnarok when he's just sitting on the bed laughing at Thor. And the Thing. Now, the next rank was Unearthly. Unearthly was Thor's strength, the Hulk's endurance, the ultimate peak for superheroes anywhere. And it was 100 points, and it's anyone who could lift more than 90 tons, or 90 tons or more. Now, there was one other stat, one other rank, and this was intended for cosmic entities. It was called Class 1000. And yes, it was 1,000 points. It was, it literally, normal stats could not match Class 1000 no matter what you did. End of story. Because 1,000 points punches somebody with, unearthly fighting, agility, strength, and endurance. That gives them 400 health. You're doing 1,000. Bing! Splat. You're down, unconscious. Oh yeah. You didn't kill anyone unless you intended to. But if you did, you gain no experience for that adventure. In 1986, the advanced rules came out, which had much varied character creation. It had some further detailing. It also introduced the idea of some further ranks between Unearthly and Class 1000. Shift X, 150. Shift Y, 250. Shift Z, 500. That just gives us a little bit more power. And ranks beyond Class 1000. That's because there's so many daggum cosmic entities in the Marvel universe. You got your Class 1000s, then the Class 3000, then the Class 5000, and then if you got the Infinity Gauntlet, or you watched the universe form from a pinhole in another dimension, and then proceeded to create the Secret Wars, you had a rank called Beyond. It was literally infinite. It had the infinity symbol as its number. So, 1984, Marvel came up with their own role-playing game thanks to TSR. So in 1985, DC Comics said, we need to do this too. So we're going to team up with, who's this guy over here? Yeah, we'll team up with him.
Oh, that's Mayfair, sir.
Okay, Mayfair Games, yeah. Now, one of the weaknesses of the Marvel system was the fact that everything was random when you created a character. If you were not playing an actual Marvel character, everything was random. I mean, everything from your stats, number of powers, how strong they were, what powers you had, what kind of talents you had, how many contacts you had. It was all random. It was literally possible in a party of 4 players to have 2 players that happened to roll up just a dead average type of character, which, best way to explain it would be some of the lower power X-Men characters. It would be about average for that game. And then Tom rolls up a character that's on par with the Silver Surfer with Thor's hammer. And Pete rolls up somebody that's on par with Aunt May when she's in their hospital bed. Yeah, it's entirely possible. So DC decided they'd borrow a page from going back up to Champions and have a points-based system. You built your character with points. If you wanted to give them a weakness like to kryptonite, that gave you more points. If you wanted to take an advantage, such as really good perception abilities, that cost points. If you wanted to give them superpowers, that cost points. And later on, they used it as a basis for a Batman, the role-playing game, which was basically just a preview of 2nd edition DC Heroes. Now, the thing is about all of these games, every single one of them, with the exception of Superworld and Heroes Unlimited, did something different. They tried new things. This was in a day when almost every fantasy game had character classes, character levels, had all the standard bits that you would expect, but the superheroes just went nuts. There were other games that have come out since then in the superhero genre. Some of them had tried new things, but a lot of them have pretty much tried to stick with what some of these old trailblazers did. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones that tried new things, like one of the more recent Marvel games and another one of the more recent DC games, bombed horribly because it was complication for the sake of complication. The goal for a superhero game is to capture the feel of the fight and the panel-to-panel action and dynamic aspects of a comic book. And Villains and Vigilantes did. Champions did, though it was a little slow. Marvel did it. DC did it. I did not play Golden Heroes or Superworld. And Heroes Unlimited was hampered by their decision to use their standard Palladium system. But they tried. Now, I'm sure you played one of the more recent games, whether it was Mutants and Mastermind or Sentinels of Liberty or any of the more recent ones. Even if you played Aberrant back in the 90s, the old White Wolf attempt at a superhero game. Well, whatever. Just remember, these are the games that I just talked about. You got to thank for that time that you got the chance to play your favorite character. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log on out of here, and I will see you next time.